Well, hi, welcome back, everyone. So, this one, I do have a script. I'll probably break away from it just because I do so love the free flow of consciousness, free thought sort of beatnik thing. But this one is about what's called social death. It's about how when people become disabled, they become socially isolated. And this lack of ability to have social interaction by sociologists is often referred to as social death, as they it's referring to the inability to socially participate in society, and this in turn gives society sort of this negative eye view of them, where they may lack sort of a social currency or even economic currency due to their lack of ability to participate in things, particularly from right-wing philosophy, that of contributing to society through the means of labor, of work. So that there's many angles to this phrase, a social death. Sometimes when I do these scripts, I feel like I'm going to leave something out, but also at the same time, with the free flow of consciousness, I sometimes reiterate things over and over and sort of lack brevity. So, in this, I wanted to begin. So this will be part one, the introduction to it. And this comes from an anecdotal experience of mine, having been full able-bodied and becoming disabled to where it takes me 4 to 6 hours to brush my teeth, it goes in the order of make coffee, brush my teeth, take a shower, check emails. That takes me 4 to 6 hours to do. It's like being caught in this constant state of perpetually getting ready. And, I can drive, but I can't really drive for more than 20 minutes, like 15 to 20 minutes due to the repetitive motion, the nature of driving. I can't look over my shoulder. So changing lanes and pulling out of parking spots can be kind of scary. I have to rely on the mirrors, but too much repetitive motion of any kind with the right arm causes a flare-up. I'll have like giant muscle spasms sticking out of my neck, like physically sticking out of my neck. They're visible. You can see them with the naked eye. It'll knock my clavicle out of place and all kinds of stuff. It becomes so painful it can actually be disorienting. And when you're disoriented, it's really not a good idea to be behind the wheel of a vehicle. So it's some of my anecdotal experience of becoming disabled and noticing like a lot of people really don't come over and check on me. They don't call very often. And I say that like I particularly mean like a family, and there's people I've known that have been longtime friends of mine that really don't very often. And honestly, like it's trying to make videos and stuff and trying to do that perpetual getting ready. Sometimes, phone call can get in the way of that, but just, sometimes it's just, it's very lonely and sad. It's not fun to just, maybe working people think it sounds like a great idea to sit around your home all day, when in all actuality, the isolation really does get to you. And we know from psychological studies, isolation can do horrible things to one's psyche. It's very mentally unhealthy, and it's you really have to fight, and it's not just a battle of getting ready with your disability and trying to adapt and sort of accommodate yourself and trying to get things done, but you also have to fight to keep your head about you because of the isolation. Like, sitting on a couch day after day after day after day for years, completely isolated from the world, is not fun. It's hard for me to get out. There are people, that, why don't you come over? Why don't we go and do this? Why don't we go and do that? And the reality is it's hard for me to get ready. I definitely want to take a shower and stuff before I go anywhere. And it's difficult for me to drive. That's the reality of it. And in fact, local Indivisible chapter here, I actually went on their Facebook when there was scheduled No Kings protest. I posted on there, hey, I'm disabled, I struggle getting out. If somebody in the local area can come and pick me up and take me and then bring me back home, that would be really appreciative. And no one responded. So, if you are disabled and you can make it out and take a stand and everything, it's seen as, stunning and brave and great and all that. It's like, look, they're disabled and they push through everything to make it out. But people don't understand there's like different varying levels and degrees of mobility, and not everyone can do that, or it may be more difficult for them to do it than others. There's also an anecdotal story that I want to tell about. There's a woman who lives in my complex, in my building right next door. And we saw not too long ago that the EMTs were at the door wanting to break the door down. And she went to the hospital, and she had friends who were coming and taking care of her dog while she was gone, yada, yada, yada. I talked to them and said, hey, here's my name, here's my phone number, there's the apartment number. I wasn't thinking about things that were going to come, but I wanted the lady next door to have access to our phone number, to feel comfortable to knock on her door, because she laid on, we didn't know this until I talked to her friends who were feeding the dog. She laid on the floor for a day and a half. And I just thought, if we had a key to the complex, I wasn't thinking about using the key to go over and take care of her dog, or having the dog come over here and take care of it. We can't we'll get evicted if we get a dog over here. But I also understand giving a stranger a key to your place is just probably scary. That's understandable. But I wasn't thinking like getting a key so that we could go in there and do things while she's in the hospital or away or whatever. It was just more of like, we don't want her to have to lay on the floor for a day and a half. And so like if that happened again, being that we're right next door and she needs EMT, or maybe my husband and I could just go over and help her up. That would be something we could do because we live right next door. She wouldn't have to wait for a day and a half. We could just easily open the door, go in, get her up, or get the EMTs if need be. That's what I was thinking. But the situation turns out is far more complex than that. So, as this begins, I have always found it strange how the right wing wants other people or organizations to take care of the disabled, but refuse to fund anything that would. I find it hypocritical that the left talks about community building, but often leaves people who are isolated from being disabled isolated. The right says family should take care of someone who's become disabled, but they themselves won't in the event that occurs. They always say that they'll do this, that's what should be done. But if a family member, their brother, their sister, their mother, whatever, becomes disabled, they're usually very, very quick to not take care of their family and to want them to go to a long-term care facility, want them to go to a retirement home, want them to have sustained independent living, even though that's physically not possible. So this is not always the case, but for the most part. And I hate to say it as a leftist, but to be intellectually honest, even leftists do this. The left won't acknowledge that the right seeks to destroy the left's solution to taking care of those who are disabled, which would work, the left's ideas would work, if the right didn't constantly strive to destroy and defund those programs. And that's the one thing that I found strange about the left is as much as they talk about wanting to help people and everything like that with these, like increasing disability approval ratings and make sure the SSA is significantly funded, even maybe reimagining it to where disability cases are automatically approved and then the investigation as to whether or not they're disabled takes place later, or do like most other countries do not do like the United States does, where disability is not approved by medical professionals. Here in the United States, whether or not you're disabled is not determined by doctors, by medical professionals. It's determined by a judge, by somebody with a law degree. Not every country does that. A lot of countries, it's medical professionals that make that decision if somebody is disabled and can no longer work. Here in the United States, you have to collect every piece of medical document you possibly can and keep retrying and reapplying for disability until the judge agrees that your medical evidence is sufficient enough to approve you, which a lot of judges, even though there's sufficient medical evidence, will deny you and make something up, like a job code that no longer exists, or a job code from like the 1950s that no longer exists. They'll try to use that, or they'll just even make up a job code that even currently exists, knowing that even with your medical restrictions you couldn't do it, but just throw it out there for the sake of trying to deny you, because they are incentivized to deny as many disability cases as possible. They actually get some kind of financial motivation to do that, to keep people off of disability. And it's just strange to me that a lot of the times when the left discusses this kind of thing, something they don't acknowledge very often is that the right wing constantly chisels away and deteriorates the very things that they put forward as the solutions. They act like there is an oppositional political philosophy to theirs. They act like there isn't a political philosophy that is directly antithetical to the things that they want to do, and there is. And even if the left, succeeds in getting the political power and institutes pretty well to like basically middle of the road socialism, some kind of social safety net where basic essentials are met, and people who are disabled that can live independently are given things like disability income so that they can continue living independently. I do not think that just because somebody can no longer work, or if they need something like food stamps, food assistance, that we should be telling them what food products they can and cannot buy. With those things, they should be allowed to pick the things that they want to eat at the grocery store, like everyone else. And actually, I'm going to give an example of where this occurs. This is a first world problem of having an issue with somebody who needs assistance in getting food and taking issue with what food item they have. Why shouldn't they be able to get the things that they like, even if you think that thing isn't healthy? Why would you want to take away their freedom, their right to autonomy to get the food items, the things that they want to eat, the things that they enjoy eating? Why can't they have that? I don't understand that. You have that. Everyone else has it. I don't know why they can't have that. It's this weird idea that if somebody doesn't work, if they need this sort of assistance, because what else are you going to do? We don't have unlimited, limitless accommodations in our society. So what else are you going to do if friends, family, community isn't stepping up, and you've taken away these programs and everything, and then you're sitting there saying, like, no, you have to eat cardboard. Basically, if you're going to have this thing given to you that's paid for with the taxes. And what I think a lot of right-wingers fail to do is understand that paying taxes towards these social programs is a way of taking care of our friends, family, and community. As a society, we are paying the funds so that these programs can exist and offer them subsidized utilities, offer them, make sure that they continue to have housing, make sure that they can have the financial means to live independently. Not everyone can live independently. There are cases of disability, predominantly with elderly people who can live independently, and still our tax dollars go to fund these long-term care facilities. But privatization doesn't seem to work in these cases, which is what the right wing philosophy wants to do. And I don't see how a private organization is going to profit by writing a check to somebody who can no longer work. Like, where does the money come from? Donations of people's pocket change? Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so, like, right now we're living in a time with the Trump regime dismantling things left and right and breaking the American government. And we didn't have a whole lot of socialism here in the United States in the first place. But whatever we did have of it, it's broken. Many, many people across America right now, across the U.S., are probably on a very long waiting list to even get their disability case to move an inch. Because of all the budget cuts, because of all the layoffs, because of all the walkouts, and now the U.S. being insolvent. We could be looking at here in the United States the possibility that the United States is so much in debt because of the Trump administration, because of the Trump regime. Trillions of dollars of debt that the SSA could be rendered infunctional. This is a real possibility. This is not hyperbolic. It's very real that the SSA could completely be trashed because of that debt. And before any right-winger thinks so that's a good thing, you've been paying taxes into that your entire working life in case of the event that you become disabled and in the event that you retire. And if you think you can retire solely off of your 401k retirement plan, you might be surprised how quickly money goes in the case of a major medical emergency. So, all that money that you paid is just gone because the government's so much in debt. It's just going to go to that debt. And you have Trump over there, suing the IRS, which is the administration that does their taxes, essentially suing the American people. You're not going to get your money back. So it went to a program that doesn't work and doesn't do anything because the right wing voted a guy in to make it not work and not do what it's supposed to do. You made it not work. You made it not function. The people who voted for that made it not work and function the way it's supposed to. And that's been going on for a while. Reagan, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., and now Trump might be the nail in the coffin for it. We might have to reimagine the SSA if we get out of this. So then in the script, then I go off into, let me start off with these anecdotal stories. I've noticed since I've become disabled that I have become increasingly more isolated. I have tried to reach out to people, but it is very rare that if ever, that someone will actually come over and check on me. And by check on me, all I really ever want is connection to community, or to socialize with another human being in real time, in real life, face to face, not over the phone, not on the internet. Many people have the time to go out and party. This happens a lot. They go out and they have fun. They go to concerts. They go traveling. All kinds of stuff. But seemingly don't have the time to take 30 minutes to just come over and talk. And this is not just a story that I've gone through. Just, it isn't me. It's a lot of disabled people that I've talked to. This is their story as well. In this insight, there is a lady that lives next to me. She fell and laid on the floor for a day and a half. I gave her my name, phone number, and apartment number in case she ever needs to reach out. Being that we are right next door, the next time an emergency happens, we can just go over and help her with no need to wait on EMTs or someone else that may take days. Why can't others do this? I'm going to dig further into that, because, there are good reasons why people don't, which really bodes more for the left philosophy, in that we need social safety nets. We need social welfare programs, because the reality is you work too much to help take care of people who are disabled. You already are with your finances stretched thin to be able to financially support people who are disabled, and etc. So it contributes to social isolation and social death when a person doesn't have the financial means to go and meet up with a friend or family member or something at a restaurant and enjoy a meal with people they care about. Because they become a financial burden at that point, because they can never pay for themselves. And so, paying taxes and to give them a monthly stipend so that they can do things like that promotes social well-being for that individual. So I think that is where I will end part 1. And then we'll get into part 2, which is basically going to go over a whole lot of what social death is and the issues of it with the social isolation for people. A lot of the times I say disabled and elderly and or elderly, as a lot of the times elderly people become disabled due to how their body breaks down with age. This is something that a lot of fully able-bodied young people don't understand, is that they may think, if I'm as healthy as I possibly can be, that'll never be me. They'll never become disabled when they're elderly. And the reality is that being the group people who are disabled, this is a group that affects everyone, because really everyone will eventually become disabled given enough time. If you live long enough, eventually you will become disabled. And the other thing is you never know when you're going to become disabled. I didn't know I was going to become disabled. I didn't even know what neurogenic thoracic outlet syndrome was. I was experiencing symptoms. I had no idea that NTOS even existed. I had no idea that when I took the job that I took, that it resulted in this, that disability was going to happen, and that it was going to be permanent, and that it was going to render my quality of life shit, and that it was going to completely trash my range of motion and make it to where that I would not be able to work and barely, take care, like I can take care of myself, I can live independently, but the majority of my day is pretty much spent doing those things. This is why I do these YouTube videos, is it gives me a sense of accomplishment, which is important to have, something that gives you motivation, something you enjoy doing, a hobby, if you will. And it's also a way of reaching out to the rest of the world and sort of socializing in a way. So, yeah. But because I'm disabled and because it takes so long just to make coffee, brush my teeth, take a shower, and check emails, that's why I don't really have a very consistent schedule in uploading videos. I mean, if it was possible, I'd upload videos every day and try to make a career out of it, but that's become very, very difficult. Saying I'm going to become a famous social media person and make money doing it is basically the same thing as saying I'm going to go off to Hollywood and become a famous movie star. Probably not. Probably not going to happen. So yeah, it's something I enjoy doing, and it gives me a sense of accomplishment when I get a video done, and feel good about myself, when I put a video out there that I think is done really well and makes a good point, and something that other people can enjoy too, and relate to and identify with. And I like sociology, I like philosophy, psychology, I like these things. I'm in no way expert in these things, but I like it, so I like doing these things. Anyway, we're going on to part 2. Thought of the name of part 2 yet. We'll call this past part 1 just the introduction to social death. Part 2, physical, environmental, social stigma, ableism, social opportunity, and support network barriers. So now that we're on to part 2, this kind of sums up what the sociological studies and stuff that I overlooked to be sociologically accurate in this, which a lot of it had to do with me questioning things that I was experiencing. I also have a story about Africa. So there'll be tons of links in the description to studies that refer to social death, social isolation, and how our societies don't really have a whole lot in the way of being able to do something about people who are disabled and lack functionality and can no longer work. Our societies are very ill-equipped to deal with it, and how this is really kind of a first world issue, as developing nations don't really encounter this problem. And in this, I'll go over why that is, and give you a real story based off of something that happened in a tribal village. So this one was part to go to my script. So how we treat the disabled and elderly, as well as homeless, just that very much ties into it. If you notice, the song that I used was the song that I created for the video about economic violence, which greatly impacts people and pushes people into homelessness, not necessarily from disability, but through a sort of systemically sanctioned forms of economic violence. But disability is another way that absolutely has notes of systemic violence and actually ties into to economic violence. And because of our lack of utility to do something, like the answers for people who are disabled and can no longer work, that often does funnel people into homelessness, which produces a problem because, like with the current administration, for example, they want to make being homeless illegal, and they want homeless people to either go to drug treatment facilities, or they want them to go to facilities that address mental health problems. The thing is when you get somebody who's physically disabled, it's like they don't know what to do with these people either. It's like they don't have access to disability that hasn't been given to them, so they end up homeless, they run out of funds, everything like that. Friends, family, and community have not helped them retain a roof over their head, and eventually they reach a point where they lose everything. They end up on the street, and they're disabled. They're physically disabled, lacking in mobility, functionality, quality of life, range of motion, all that. And so they could end up at a addiction treatment facility, and they may not. There's a possibility they may be self-medicating because they've been abandoned by the medical, by the health. I want to say institution. It's not really an institution. It's more like industry, because they the lack of money, so they don't have resources towards medical attention. So some might end up self-medicating. Personally, I don't blame them for that. I don't know what else you're supposed to do, but they may not be self-medicating, and therefore there's nothing there to counsel on as far as addiction goes. And so they don't know what to do with these people, because it's like, well, they're not struggling with addiction. It's not like they blew all their money on drugs and ended up homeless. They're disabled. And you take them to the other facility that addresses mental illness, or, emotional health. And they say, well, we don't know what to do with this person either, because they're mentally sound mind and everything. They can think perfectly well about balance a budget and all that, and they're not struggling with addiction. In what they run in, like, the next answer would be, well, can you help them find a job? And then they look at the medical restrictions and the physical limitations that they have and go, no, literally, this person just, no one's going to hire them. The medical restrictions they have, they just can't work. There's no way that they can be employed and start making money, especially gainful employment to where it will be substantial enough to where they will be able to get back on their feet, start paying for rent, which is exceedingly high and has just gotten higher and higher and higher. And so you can't find them a job. You can't find them a place to live because they can't make any money. They have no access to continuity of medical care. They don't know what to do with these people. They don't fit into the drug addiction category. They don't fit into the mental decline category. And they still can't get disability. So what are you supposed to do? They don't know what to do either. That's a big problem. It's a vicious feedback loop that just doesn't work. Is that the narrative that everyone who's homeless is either it's because they're addicted or because they have mental health issues, until you run into somebody who's physically disabled and can't work. What do you do? What are you supposed to do? Well, there isn't anything except send them back on the street, where they're going to end up because they literally, descriptive reality, can't work, or more specifically, can't get gainful employment. Maybe some people are at a point where they can do very minor labor for very short periods of time through the week, like maybe 4 hours twice a day, or twice a week, at a reduced wage from the employer. That's not gainful employment, though. That's not going to get you into an apartment. Not even low income studio. It's not even going to afford that. So right back on the street, going back through this cycle over and over and over and over and over again, all because we can't just acknowledge the fact this person has become physically disabled and they can't work anymore. They can't get gainful employment. The only way they're going to get a roof back over their head is if they get approved for that disability and start receiving disability payments, and possibly have their rent and utilities and such subsidized. So yeah, that's why I use the song in this, is because it ties into like a form of economic violence. It absolutely ties into that video, that essay that I did on economic violence. And I even go into, and even war veterans, which are often afflicted with either being disabled or elderly or a combination of both or all of the above. So these things are not mutually exclusive. They can be, there's a lot of intersectionality in this. And you can explore this through intersectionality as far as how being disabled impacts LGBTQIA, disabled, elderly, veteran, homeless, etc. How that intersects with being LGBTQIA plus, how it intersects with being a woman, how it intersects with being BIPOC, being a person of color. Because all of this is very intersectional. I can't go through all the intersectionalities. That would be crazy. Like, I mean, I could, but the video would not be a video. It would be like an event. Let's sit down and watch this 15-hour thing that Jinx made. Okay, so yeah. Here in the US, we do not have a very good or well-funded system to deal with those who can no longer work due to medical restrictions or the lack of limitless ability to accommodate, like that of the man from the village tribal community in Africa. I will get into that later, but not right now. So what do I mean by limitless ability to accommodate? Well, limitless ability to accommodate means quite literally what it says. There's no limitation on how you can accommodate someone, like the ability to walk into an employer's place and say, I can do these specific things for you and not other things due to a disability. Can you pay me for that in a way to where it is gainful payment, and that I'll be able to at least be able to afford the basic essentials of life. So utilities, housing, and food, and medical care. We don't have that in our current system. That's not actually due a lot to right-wing political philosophies. That's one of the things. Like during Trump's first term, he made it to where businesses could define for themselves what reasonable accommodation is, which they don't really consider much of anything to be reasonable accommodation. So that made it to where a lot of people with disabilities can no longer be employed. And then in this second term of his that he's doing, he literally made it to where businesses can, like an employer can openly discriminate based on being a person of color, being LGBTQ, being a woman, your age, and being disabled. They doesn't matter if you don't need any accommodations. They can just outright say, we're not hiring you because you are disabled now. The overturning of like the DEIA, that I think is the full acronym, is DEIA. It's not just DEI, it's DEIA. Overturning that, getting rid of that, has made it so that yes, employers can legally outright just flat out discriminate. Like, oh, you're a woman, we're not hiring you. Oh, you're a certain age, we're not hiring you. Oh, you're trans, or you're married to someone of the same sex or gender as yourself. Well, okay, I'm not hiring you. Oh, you have a disability? Well, I'm not hiring you. Getting rid of DEIA actually makes it so that employers can do that. And then you tell these people, somebody with a disability, oh, you need to go and get employed when they can't in the first place because they're limited in their mobility. And then you've made it to where companies can say, we're not accommodating you, and we're just flat out not hiring you because we don't want to. And then you wonder why, like people who could work can't, and why they need to apply for disability because they have a disability that could be accommodated to, but the company considers that unreasonable accommodations. Or because the company is just outright, no, we're not hiring you because we can discriminate against people with disabilities, and we're going to do that. The right people on right-wing philosophical diatribes, they tend to make decisions or influence the society and the system in ways that create the problems that we need to solve, and it's pretty wild. It's strange to admit, but not being able to help those who are disabled or elderly is a first world problem, and not one that persists in developing countries. Here in the U.S., we have solutions or proposed solutions from both the right and the left of the political divide, but neither seem to actually be effective for different reasons. And in doing this, it's difficult, but to be intellectually honest, I was surprised to see that even in sociology, they in studying disabled people and the effects of like social isolation and losing sort of social credit and what they call social death. Even they have criticized the left in certain aspects, and we'll get into that. The left's idea of dealing with the issue of disability and the elderly whom can no longer work is that of having community support for one. The issue with this, as much as people think it sounds good, and many want to be helpful towards their friends, family, community, and neighbors, the reality is that they will often do what everyone else does and leave those who are elderly and disabled isolated. This isn't a right or left reflection in and of itself, as this tends to be a general response from people as a whole. Very few people actually make the effort to call or go over and check on those who are disabled and elderly, leaving them isolated. Many seem to want to shirk off this responsibility onto others. The reality is that by the end of the day, everyone is caught up in dealing with their work schedule, paying their bills, and dealing with their life issues to be able to take care of someone else's. And we will get into how the right does this, so don't worry, that's coming. But first, we're going to look over the critiques of the left. The left wants to create social safety nets and where we pay taxes and have cemented government programs to where everyone chips in a little bit to take care of the medical needs and other needs such as housing, food, and utilities, etc. For those who are elderly or disabled, the problem with this is that the left seems to make this assumption that they are in full control of the political establishment, and they are not. When they do not actually help take care of their fellow family or community members, especially those who lack mobility and are left isolated, the idea that they can just receive disability payments, receive state-funded medical care, doesn't take into account that many elderly and disabled people don't just automatically get disability retirement payments, Medicaid, Medicare, because they are not the only political position that holds political power. Many times the right wing will use the political power they have to make these things harder to get, and even to the extreme of not being able to access them at all. Right now, we are even living in a time that is a perfect example that the left's political opposition only need one man to take the right office, such as Trump as the president, and this one man can use his power to enact far-right policies that can even completely destroy the agencies that make the social safety nets the left wants to rely on completely voided as the funding gets cut, rendering the financial well these programs pull from completely financially dry. The other aspect is they put policies in place that reduce something like disability approval rates from 80% all the way down to 30%, and currently even less than that at pretty much 1% to 0%. And that's true. Like right now, if you're applying for disability, your case isn't moving. Like I talked about in the first part of this. This idea of social welfare or social safety nets via socialism is a really good idea, as it enables those who can live independently the ability to continue to do so, but can't work due to a disability or elderly to where they can no longer work. What the left fails to recognize is that the right wing, which hates socialist ideas, only need one person to take one position in office to destroy it. This leaves us back to where we started, with the question, what do we do with those who can no longer work because they are disabled and or elderly? As the social services are no longer a viable option, or so red taped one may become homeless before even being able to access those social services. In the face of right-wing populist punditry, these social welfare programs and the agencies that run them are possibly only temporary. The left makes the claim that they want to involve as many people from their community as possible. It is true that the left is far more willing to make accommodations for those with disabilities. However, the desire to wanting this to apply to those with mobility issues does not always carry over to playing out in real time. For people with disabilities that are able to march in protest for their rights, this really isn't an issue for them. For those that struggle every day with bathing, getting dressed, routine hygienic maintenance, and getting out of their home, marching to protest for their rights is not something they are able to do, as simply maintaining is a challenge alone. They may be able to live independently, but they can't do any kind of physical labor. This is a really hard thing to look at because from a sociological, factual perspective, or trying to be as accurately factual as possible, we can't just critique the right-wingers' answers or suggestions on what to do with those who can no longer work. The left also has issues that leave us with a society that just doesn't have a good way to deal with those who can no longer work. The other aspect is that if someone is full able-bodied, and you know someone who is isolated because they are disabled or elderly, it really isn't asking too much. It isn't too expensive. In fact, it's free. And it really doesn't take a whole lot of physical energy to call or go over to someone's home and check on them. Checking on someone who is elderly and or disabled doesn't necessarily mean seeing if they are alive. Taking just 30 minutes of your time to just sit and talk with them may be all that is needed. And sitting with someone and talking to them for 30 minutes really isn't physically hard and costs no money. there really isn't much of an excuse of not doing this. The reality is, at some point, people die. The only time we really have to spend time with them, is the people we love and care about, is while they are alive. And there is no room for regrets after they are dead. After they are gone, there is no second chances. That was it when they were alive. So many of us on the left think of ourselves as having good praxis. We consume our leftist media for the information war, the culture war, whatever. We donate money to good causes and try to help those in need, like children, cancer patients, people with disabilities, and marginalized communities. The fact of the matter is that none of those things actually help friends, family, and community members who are isolated due to physical disability and struggling to stay afloat because they have lost the ability to work and their finances are running dry. As disability slowly evaporates before our eyes, as currently the U.S. has become insolvent and may not even have the funds to pay the people who are already retired and disabled. It is thus not praxis to give your favorite social media personality money so that they can keep making content that champions for better socialism, which is great that, people are making content advocating for more socialism and to create a society where basic needs are met. That's great. But that doesn't help the people who need it right now. That, people who are losing their homes, people who can't, who are on the cusp of death because they can't afford medical bills. For better socialism, to give to people who are elderly and disabled the ability to keep their home and pay bills, it is not enough to say, fuck the system, and give us universal health care when instead of donating to charity, which even the best of them take a 70% cut at least, when instead of giving money to some social media personality, you could be using that money to support that person who is disabled and may end up homeless and losing everything. If you have money for pointless nonsense or to engage in mass consumerism, you have the ability to help someone who is elderly or disabled. If you have time to scream into the void that the U.S. still doesn't have essential socialist programs in place, you have the time to talk to someone who's disabled for 30 minutes. It's that whole thing of everyone wants to do something to solve homelessness, but no one actually wants to put the work to make that happen, aside from a few, which typically isn't enough. Now let's look at the right wing. The right wing loves to destroy the left's idea of social welfare, which would work if the right wasn't so eager to destroy it. Instead of these things being done by government agencies that use tax dollars to create public socialist services available that go beyond just for those who become elderly or disabled, such as universal health care. This comes from the idea that they do not want to pay the taxes for these things, as paying for the support of the elderly and disabled should be optional. The thing is, every time this is tried, not enough people want to donate to those private organizations that give them the financial ability to do the services they are intended to do. This causes these private organizations to basically shut down or run so ineffectively they cannot even come close to addressing the issue at all. The other issue of the right goes to the argument of, well, it should be your family, and sometimes they throw in friends and community in there as well, that takes care of you when you become elderly or disabled, which is a fine thing to do and wonderful when it happens. However, the issue is, most of the time, this doesn't happen, particularly with those of a right-wing philosophy that argues for hyper-individualism. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps, or that every man is his own island, and so on. It becomes a failure to acknowledge the very real reality that in our society, the market economy, limitless accommodations do not exist. Partly why they do not exist is due to right-wing political philosophies themselves in favor of free market capitalism. They argue that the government should not require companies to accommodate people in ways the company does not want to, and that what is considered reasonable accommodation should be determined by the employer themselves, even going as far as to allow for legal discrimination. This also fails to address the very real issue that even wage cut compensation for an accommodation most likely is not even close to a livable wage, putting us back at square one on what are the disabled and elderly supposed to do. This idea also fails to address those where family taking care of them is not an option, whether due to the family just not wanting to, or the fact that many people have no family to turn to for a variety of reasons, such as death or being disowned because you're LGBTQ. There are so many issues with the right wing's response to elderly and disabled people to where it really seems more dismissive for self-interest and no actual serious idea on what to do. Really just dismissive of oh, why don't they just get disability? Well, that's not an option because of the policies you put in place so that you don't have to pay taxes for it. Oh, well, why don't they just go to the church? Well, the church is really limited in what they can do because you only donate pocket change to them. And on that goes. It's just, why doesn't your family take care of you? Well, that's not an option. My parents are dead, or they refuse to. Oh, well, that's not. It's very dismissive. Very, very dismissive. Getting food at a food bank, for example, is not going to help someone who's struggling to pay hyperinflated medical bills, which they're inflated because of right-wing philosophy and the man that they put in office. Nor car repairs. Same thing. And the car repairs for a car that helps them maintain their independence, nor hyperinflated rent and housing costs, which, again, are hyperinflated because of right-wing philosophies for free market capitalism and the man that they put in office. Planning for the future is not always a feasible option, as no one knows when or how they can or could become disabled. You may have a great retirement savings saved up and come to find very quickly how that money goes when faced with a major life-threatening medical issue that leaves you not only disabled, but penniless. We do not have crystal balls, and despite what some people claim, no one is psychic and can predict the future. Because let's say you just got into the job market. Something could happen where you become disabled. You could get in a car accident. You could have a major medical emergency that causes you to be disabled. Disability, you can become disabled before you're elderly. Like you don't know. So you could have just started your career journey and have pretty much nothing as a 401k, and then boom, disabled. You're living independently. Your family won't help you. You have no 401k to retire early. This just doesn't account for the problems that persist, the right-wing philosophy. Having a retirement savings is not always the answer, because it can happen when you're 21. And you may end up spending all of your retirement savings fighting cancer to survive, to live, and then end up on the other side of that disabled, no longer able to work, and no more retirement savings. That's the thing. You don't have a crystal ball. You can't predict the future. You can plan and prepare for the best as much as you want, but there's still things that come out of nowhere that you couldn't possibly predict that put a damper in that. It is also not reasonable to expect that everyone in society can be independently wealthy. This is the other thing of, like, if you're not super rich and stuff, it's your fault. It's just because of your decisions that you've made. But this draws into the question: who's doing the work that allows you to be rich if everyone is rich? It's oxymoronic to claim that everyone in an entire society can be that of an employer class with no employees. Who's the employees? What's making your company go? Where's the money coming from? There was actually a video by a live stream by Thought Slime where he literally, like, this was brought up, like, everyone's just going to be an entrepreneur, and it's like, but where's the money who's generating money? Where's the money coming from? And there's no answer to this. It's just, all of us can just be wealthy entrepreneurs and of the employer class with no employees to draw from to generate the goods and services that generate the money. Okay, where does the money come from? So, yeah, who's doing the work that allows you to be rich if everyone is rich? Meaning, being poor is not a choice. It is an outcome in our society that dictates that a certain amount must be middle and lower class. Otherwise, the system itself just does not work. And it really doesn't matter what you do. You can get educated. You can learn a trade skill. None of that guarantees that a max wage will be available for you within the job market. And all max and middle wage jobs may be taken, leaving you only with the lower class wage jobs to do, which is something Gen Z is finding out. Should look this up. It's a really big thing right now. A lot of Gen Z they'll have several degrees, that they'll be fully capable of getting a very, very good paying job. It's like with my generation, we, like a bunch of people I knew, graduated with good degrees and ended up in okay paying jobs like management and stuff. But all the jobs that they were qualified to do were all taken up. And so what Gen Z's going through is even worse, because they're graduating, they're high skilled, should be getting high paying jobs with all this debt, and they end up having to work 3 service industry low paying jobs, and end up living in cars and RV. There's a massive epidemic of Gen Zers and people living in cars and RVs, because housing and life, like the affordability of everything is just so out of touch and out of reach, and the job market is crap. The reason why the right seems to be the worst is because while both people on the left and the right seem to say they want to do something and then don't, the right is the only group that actively seeks to shut down any idea that would actually address the issue on what we do with elderly and disabled people in society, by actively and selfishly refusing to pay taxes, or to fund the social safety nets, or to fund the private organizations they want people to turn to instead of the socialist stuff. It seems so hypocritical. It is almost like they come up with supposed solutions simply to not have to admit they are awful, terrible people who only care about themselves, because they do not care about the well-being and outcome of the elderly and disabled at all. The mistake in this is that being disabled in a group, as a group, everyone potentially is in that. If you live long enough, it is inevitable. You'll become disabled eventually. It is easy to dismiss retirement and disability payments from a social system when one is full able-bodied and not elderly, as many people lack the foresight to understand who this attitude will affect, or how this attitude will affect them in the future when they become disabled and elderly. And they come to find out how lacking society is in dealing with those who can no longer work in real time. So that completes part 2. I'm going to go into part 3, where part 3 is going to be quotations from the sociology studies and what have you. So that part won't be my script. It won't be my words. All of it will be quotations from peer-reviewed research and sociological research, psychological research, stuff from social services from the UK, from the United States, and how social workers observe this happening, this social isolation, losing social credit, and social death. And where I pulled the information that answered the questions that I was fiddling around with in my head. So we're going to go on to that, to part 3. Don't know what that's called yet, so I'll have to find out when that comes out. The recording is different. You're going to watch it just direct, but this could be tomorrow for me. You don't understand. You don't understand the magic of editing. Yeah, anyway, we'll go on to part 3. That's it, part 2. Part 3. Quotes from sociology studies.
They just want you to be abled again so that you're not inconveniencing them. People get tired of you being sick, but they don't stop to think that you are probably fucking tired of being sick too. They don't take the time to think about how you'd love to just get over it. They don't care enough to realize you didn't choose this.
All right, so the following here, these are not my words, these are quotes taken from the source material of research from sociological studies talking about this issue. Comes from places like uk.gov, PubMed, NIH, and a lot of other sociological sources that study this. So all the links to those sources, citations, will be in the description below. So if you want to dig deeper and do your own research and stuff like that, I will leave the links to these sources in the description, along with many others. All right, so here we go. Disabled people often become isolated due to a combination of physical barriers, social stigma, and reduced energy, which limit participation in social activities. Inaccessible transportation and venues make socializing difficult, while ableism, including avoidance, awkwardness, or pity from others, often causes friends and family to drift away. Key factors driving this isolation include physical and environmental barriers, a lack of accessible venues, unreliable transportation, and physical health challenges, such as fatigue or chronic pain, make leaving the house or participating in activities difficult. Social stigma and ableism. Misconceptions about disability, along with uncomfortable or awkward reactions from friends and family, can lead to exclusion. Some people may treat disabled individuals differently or view them as a quote-unquote burden, leading to strained relationships. Reduced social opportunities. Many disabled people have lower incomes due to employment barriers, restricting their ability to engage in paid social activities. Internalized stigma and mental health. The stress of managing a disability can lead to reduced energy for maintaining relationships or cause individuals to withdraw to avoid feeling like a burden or experiencing social awkwardness. Lack of support networks. Often, informal support systems, such as friends and family, may not understand the specific needs of the disabled person, leading to unmet needs and subsequent isolation, as noted on PubMed Central. This combination of factors often leads to as stated on gov.uk, disproportionate experience of loneliness and social exclusion compared to the non-disabled population. This is a common observation that there is a significant gap between political rhetoric and lived reality of caregiving. We're pointing out a specific kind of social bystander effect. That happens across the spectrum, where the responsibility of care is always shifted elsewhere. The disconnect we are seeing often breaks down like this. On the left, the hypocrisy often lies in performative inclusion. There is a strong verbal commitment to mutual aid and community care, but these frameworks often default to the needs of the able-bodied. Example, protests that require long walks or meetings in inaccessible basements. When the community requires high needs, long-term physical or emotional labor, the solidarity often evaporates because it interferes with the individual's own lifestyle or productivity. On the right, The logic loop usually centers on individualism versus the market. By advocating for private solutions while simultaneously starving those systems of the funding or tax-based support they need to function, a care vacuum is created. The expectation is that the family should provide the care, but in modern economy, where every adult is often required to work full-time to survive, the family is physically and financially unable to do so. Ultimately, both sides often treat disability as a theoretical problem to be solved by a system, either the community or the market, rather than a personal responsibility that requires a sacrifice of time, money, or comfort. This leads to what sociologists call social death, where disabled people are still alive, but effectively erased from the functional social fabric because neither side wants to bear the cost of inclusion. That story about the milking stool perfectly illustrates the difference between functional inclusion and modern bureaucratic management. In a village, the cost of helping a neighbor is seen as an investment in the social fabric in a modern Western state. Disability is often treated as a cost center or a line item to be optimized or cut. The fragility of the left's systemic fix, that many on the left focus almost exclusively on winning the government game. They advocate for massive top-down programs because they want a guaranteed safety net. However, this ignores political volatility. If the community only exists through a government check, the community disappears the moment a different party takes power. By outsourcing care to the state, the local interpersonal muscle for taking care of each other atrophies. The right's market blind spot. The right often argues that the family or the church should handle care, yet they support economic policies that make that nearly impossible. When you have an economy that requires both parents to work 40 hours a week just to pay rent, there is no one left at home to be the quote-unquote village. They advocate for a traditional support system while supporting an economic model that has effectively dismantled it. The first world societies, we've traded connectedness for efficiency. We want a professional or a program to handle it, so we can keep working or pursuing our own lives. This creates the social death mentioned, where a person is physically kept alive by medicine or a check, but is no longer a member of the tribe in any meaningful way. And that's it. So that starts off with the intro that I had. I thought this was a really important part to put in. Like I said, all the links to where this stuff came from will be in the description below. So if you want to do a deeper dive, research it on your own, this is a real thing sociologists study. And they don't just study, in real sociology, they don't just study the pitfallings of right-wing philosophy, which, like I said, right-wing philosophy is the major hurdle, because the left actually does have a solution, where if we do actual socialist policies with a social welfare, social safety net, that takes care of it. You don't cure social death necessarily, but it does make it so that people who are disabled that have the ability for independent living still have some kind of monetary means to participate in society and carry some level of social value. That's why I don't think we should be restricting people with food stamps on what kinds of foods they can eat. They should be able to pick up things that they like just like everyone else. I mean, if they want to host a get-together and all they have is, these foods that right-wing people argue that people on food stamps should have, those very same people wouldn't want to eat that food, wouldn't go to the gathering, which again loses their social cost, their social value. Maintaining independency is a very important part. When you become disabled, you realize that very quick. Being dependent is not fun. You will very, very quickly learn, if you ever become disabled, how fast you will long for your and lament for your independency back, and not like the fact that you will become dependent on others because you are physically limited and there's not much else you can do about it. So now we're going to move on to part 4.
Part 4. The story of the man in the tribal village.
So along this little journey, I've mentioned that this is a Western or a first world problem, and in this was a story that I had run into where this illustrates how it is a first world problem, a Western problem, a developed nation problem. As this story comes from a developing nation, and in a lot of, there are developing nations, predominantly in Africa, but not limited to. You also have others. That deal with communal tribal societies. And I'm not sure, I don't remember where, this is a true story, I don't remember where I got the story from. Could be TED Talks, maybe. Maybe not though. But this is a true story. So, and how a lot of these tribal communal villages in rural areas deal with members of their village who can no longer work. It's a very interesting story. The story that I am referring to, where I am calling our inability to provide a safety net to the elderly and disabled, also the social death that people who are elderly and disabled, which is where people who lack mobility or struggle with mobility issues become isolated. There is a story I heard, I think it was on TED Talks, but I'm not certain because it has been a while. There was a man who lived in a tribal communal village who stepped on a landmine left over from the many attempted occupations of the West or from the many wars over the years. It's some country in Africa, I don't remember where, specifically in Africa, what country, where the tribe is located specifically to the story. But that's where it takes place. He stepped on a landmine and it blew his legs off. As a result, he lost his legs, which provided a physical disability. But he also developed a form of PTSD from this and became scared to go out and into the fields to do any work over the fear of stepping on another landmine. And in these areas, too, it's really nifty. They've trained rats to sniff these landmines out. They've been systematically removing them by the use of rats, training rats to sniff them out. It's really interesting. The village came together. They got him a stool to sit on so that he could be comfortable. They also bought him a cow and moved the cow close to his home to where he could sit on the stool and milk the cow on his own schedule whenever he was able to do so. And they did this to where he could literally sit inside of his hut, inside of his home, and have like a doorway to where the cow's outside, where he could sit inside of his home on this stool and milk the cow. So he didn't even have to leave his home to do this. The village did not pressure him into working. They did not assign a level of resources he needed to survive based on the level of work output. He still had the same access to all resources that everyone else in the village has or had in order to survive. You know, they didn't cut back on his access to food and housing and clothing and all that, just because he was very limited in the amount of work that he could do. And this is something that we do not really do in developed nations. We assign some kind of worth to people, to human beings, based on the labor output that they do, rather than holding life in and of itself valuable, and that these essential needs to survive are not seen as such, but seen as things that are earned. I would argue that there are things that should be earned, like TVs, computers, things like that. You know, like soda pop or whatever. Like, okay, you don't need soda pop, you want it. Yeah, there are things that are not needs, but like, why hold back on the basic needs that a human being must have in order to live, like food, shelter. I say utilities because that's, you know, drinkable water, running water for bathing in, washing your clothes, washing your dishes, cooking, drinking, maintain hygiene, or the ability to heat and cool your home. Because, you know, here, if in the winter, if you can't heat your home, you literally could freeze to death. If not, you know, the pipes carrying the water could expand and burst as the water freezes. And in the summertime, it gets hot enough to where if you don't have cooling, you die from a heat stroke. Actually, every year, there is a death toll, particularly amongst the disabled and elderly community, from heat stroke due to inadequate cooling systems installed for their homes, which is, in this local area, it's a requirement that the AC units and heating units, it's considered an essential thing that it has to be working, because people die from that. So they don't do this in these communal villages. They don't go, oh, well, you can only milk a cow sometimes because your legs got blown off and you have PTSD. So we're not going to give you as much food. We're only going to give you a dinner roll. We're not going to give you clothes, even though you need them. We're not going to give you housing, even though you need. No, they don't do that. The essential needs are still met. Your worth as a human being is not decided based upon your labor output. It is decided on the fact that you are a member of the community and indeed a human being, which I wish we did in our society. A lot of right-wing philosophy posits that our worth be allocated to uh, our labor output, financial worth, and instead of a bare basic of you're a part of the society, a part of the community, you're a human being, you're alive, and that's where we start at the worst. So you need food, you need shelter, you need the utilities. These are the essential needs. Extra stuff, okay, fine. Maybe that should be allocated to labor force, to labor output, to work to gain those things. Why basic essential needs, though, why that's the case for those things, I don't understand that. And it seems to just be an excuse to be able to profit off of people in the most severe ways. Like, our system is also really, really poorly designed to deal with death. We expect people to pay for what we do with a corpse, whether it's cremation, burial, or whatever. And the thing is if that person doesn't have family members, the state's got to pay for it, because we've created that system to be that of a free market capitalist system, that it is a market system in dealing with the dead. And you're essentially proposing that somebody who's dead, if no one in their family is alive left to do so, that the dead person is responsible for paying for the burial, the headstone, the cremation, whatever. How do you get money from a dead person? Especially if they don't have any, like they don't have any, they don't have any money in savings. That's all gone, and they don't have any accumulated value from the things that they owned. So how do you get money from a dead person that doesn't have anything like that? And you can't. So it just seems like a really, that seems like a really crappy system, and it's not really well designed to deal with taking care of the bodies of the dead, because it's based on business and profit, rather than a function that society needs. We can't just have rotting bodies laying around all over the place. That causes illness and disease and problems. So it's a function. Society needs to be able to take care of the dead and deal with them properly. And if you monetize that and say, well, I'm not taking care of this dead person, disposing of their body properly, because there's no profit in it for me, that presents an issue to society, because you end up with bodies rotting in the street and everything, which creates public health issues. And these communal villages and stuff, they don't assign that sort of worth to people. It's not based off of labor output or the value of the accumulated things or the stuff that you have, or money set aside. That's for other things. Essential needs are a must. They're guaranteed, because you're a human being. You're alive. You need these things. So, needed resources like food, water, and shelter are considered just essential needs, and everyone in the village gets them regardless of the work they do or don't do. Labor is also not used as a source of income or commodity. Labor is something that is done out of necessity for the village as a whole, thus adding to it not being a big deal if those who are full able-bodied put out more physical labor than those who can't. The overall goal of those in the village is not the survivability of one person, but to ensure the survivability and well-being of everyone in their village, period. Something that right-wing hyper-capitalism and hyper-individualism can't afford. The philosophy is just completely antithetical to that. Those who live in these tribal villages accept those who have become disabled and elderly and may only be able to do very minimal work, or those who can no longer work at all. They accept that other members of their village may only be able to contribute through very simple tasks, meaning the one thing these rural communal villages have over us in the industrialized world is what I was referring to as limitless accommodations. There is no limit to the accommodations that are needed for specific individuals in the tribal village at all, including if that accommodation is doing nothing other than offering other villagers company, companionship, advice, wisdom, and so on, which is something tribal communities have been doing for centuries. A lot of the times the elderly provide wisdom and advice to the other people in the village as they've lived long and they can't do physical labor anymore, possibly because they broke their body permanently. And therefore, other warriors or people that do specific tasks in the village can glean a lot of advice from that person to avoid that same issue. And help them with relationships, help them deal with internal issues, existential crises, whatever. They actually can make up that difference of social isolation, of social death, by offering companionship as a function for the society for those who might be socially isolated and experience social death. They can go and visit with them. They can keep them company. One person might have neuropathy in their legs. Another person might have nerve issues in their arms, but one can walk and the other can't. They've got arms, and together they can do things and sort of be as one person. Or you may have somebody who is physically disabled, but their mental acuity is very, very high functioning, whereas another person may not have very functioning mental acuity, but a lot of physical strength. And together, they can create a team of two that is highly survivable. Is one acts as sort of the brain, and the other carries out the physical tasks needed. That this is cooperative survival in action. One of the things that makes human beings the species that we are, and our ability to survive, is the ability to co-opt all these different sort of niche abilities from each individual within the group. It sort of makes the totality of the group sort of a super being. And this is actually one of the reasons why human beings are sort of the indestructible force that we are. Because actually, human beings, we're not very strong. We're not very fast. We seem to be pretty smart compared to the other species. But when it comes to hunting and stuff, The thing that we have upon other species is our ability to have cooperative survival. If you mess with one of us, you mess with our entire group, our entire village, our entire society comes to aid. So that's what makes us the unstoppable force that we are. Why we have survived this long. And why, being humanitarian, why having empathy and sympathy is so important. It's an aspect of our evolution that has allowed us to survive as long as we have. If we didn't have it, we would have died off a long time ago. So now we're gonna move on to part 6 and wrap this up.
Part 5. Conclusion. The left's performative rights market-wide spot in logical, and those in general don't want to put in the work.
So here we're at part 5, the conclusion. Sort of wrapping up what we went over. I do have a script for this. I might free flow of consciousness towards the end to sort of wrap up the conclusion. But right-wing political philosophy will not allow for limitless accommodations, while left-wing philosophy would be far more accepting to the idea of limitless accommodations. The thing really holding us back from this is that we are not a small rural village. We live in a modern industrial society with massive infrastructure and very large populations of people in very dense areas where the person who lives right next door to you is a complete stranger. The left's philosophy to adjust for this is that us paying taxes is essentially us taking care of our friends, family, and community, and even our future selves in the event that we become disabled and elderly, retired, can't work anymore. Paying taxes, it goes towards taking care of health costs, giving someone who can no longer work a monthly paycheck, giving someone who needs food benefits where they are not being forced to eat things but can still exercise their preference for the food they like to eat like everyone else in our village or society. Giving them subsidized housing, utilities, and granting them access to all the things that are basic essential needs to live. It sucks to have to look at this through a critical lens as a leftist myself, but if we are to be intellectually honest, according to sociology research that has been done, we have to criticize where this leftist philosophy fails. The reason why this leftist idea of universal health care, disability payments, guaranteed retirement payments, which, if the system functioned properly, the payments between disability and retirement should not be different. It's all about meeting basic needs, which shouldn't matter if you are disabled or elderly. People need basic needs whether they can work or not, or whatever is causing you to not be able to work anymore. Basic needs should be met regardless. The reason why we do not have these socialist programs is because the left often overlooks the reality that the left is not the only political position that can and will hold power. We always talk about these socialized programs and systems in a way where it is like, hey, if only we got there, we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore and only maintain it. As I pointed out before, though, the issue is that all it takes is one person that is far right enough in the right position of political power, and we see the whole system destroyed in one foul swoop. The things that the left can do that would be more permanent, helpful things to do, not a fix, but helpful, is to realize that saying you want to help people who are isolated from being elderly, disabled, or both is not enough. Sometimes the biggest heroes are not people who do big things where everyone knows their name. Sometimes it is as simple as actually going over and checking on your neighbor who is disabled and or elderly. Seeing if they need anything that you can actually help with. Simply taking 30 minutes of your time just to talk to them, giving them some sort of connection to society that they have most likely lost. That 30 minutes gives them a chance to socialize, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, and importantly, to combat social death, a sense of importance. It is all stuff from Maslow's hierarchy of needs that leads to self-actualization. The whole thing is about social death, which is where, as much as people think they may not do this, as much as people want to be humanitarian, often people who become disabled, especially with mobility issues, leaving them predominantly stuck at home all day, every day. This leaves them isolated and alone, sometimes struggling with physical things they can no longer do, with no one to turn to at all. One of the big killers is social media, which there is nothing social about social media, as it keeps us all separated and isolated from each other in real life. I personally call social media anti-social media because of it, for many reasons, not just this. Hearting or liking something someone posts on the internet or even commenting is still not the same as actual physical human interaction. The biggest thing we can do to combat social death. We should keep fighting for socialist ideas that argue basic needs should be met and seen as basic human rights. We should also make sure we check up on our community members who can no longer leave their homes and may struggle to do so. We should also consider the intersectionality of this as well. Think about how isolating it is for someone who is disabled in mobility or someone who is elderly and mobility disabled from the LGBTQIA+ community. They may not have many friends left, especially if they lived through the 80s. They may not have any family left that cares for them, as many LGBTQ people get disowned by their families. They may not have kids that check up on them. So if you are full able-bodied, it really is not that hard to take just 30 minutes a week to go over in person to someone you know to go to their home in person and spend 30 minutes talking to them, or maybe go a step further and help them with some chores, or go even further than that and help them pay for one of their bills. Because we all know, as long as this Trump administration is in place, and let me be clear, and disability cases are backed up due to the Trump regime, all the layoffs, budget cuts, and mass walkouts. It is also possible disability in the U.S. could stop functioning entirely because the Trump regime has pushed the U.S. debt so far that the U.S. is currently insolvent, which means the SSA in its entirety could be over, leaving disabled people with no options at all if they have no one to care for them. It could also mean all those taxes we have spent on our own future for retirement are also gone. It's not like they will refund us, especially when the country is not essentially, I put essentially bankrupt. It is bankrupt. Our assets do not cover the amount that the United States owes, nor do we have the financial capability to both are gone. That's how much debt has been accrued. And plus, then you have Trump suing the IRS. I mean, so what is social death? First of all, we have a system that can't even make room to help people who can no longer work due to being disabled, but are still able to live independently. This leaves them in a state of financial hell, to where they may want to go out to eat, but have no money, and this leaves them socially isolated. Sometimes people feel uncomfortable around those who are disabled, leaving them socially isolated. They may not so easily be able to get out and go somewhere, which makes them socially isolated. Society has a tendency to blame them, where people think the person is able to get out and just isn't. They blame the person who is disabled as being lazy or something to this effect. This sort of stigmatization is not only gaslighting, but it also contributes to their social death by being socially isolating. Before I end this, I do want to say that while I utterly despise right-wing political philosophy and see traditionalism as the inability to accept our understandings of reality within science as it shakes the foundation of their worldview, especially for theists. I actually think right-wingers are more guilty of what Jordan Peterson calls postmodernism. They're the ones that keep wanting to rewrite reality, descriptive reality, because descriptive reality, as the more we understand about our world, or we understand things like evolution, stuff like that, it challenges their worldview in a way where even one aspect of that, like certain aspects of that worldview, if they were to acknowledge these things like being gay is involuntary, it's not a choice, or that evolution is real, their entire ideological structure falls apart. And so they end up rewriting a fictionalized reality and to replace our understanding of the actual descriptive reality. So they're replacing a descriptive reality with a prescriptive reality so that their worldview can continue. Because if they admit these aspects of their worldview, like trickle-down economics, we keep doing that over and over and over and over and over again, and it doesn't fucking work. There's mountains of evidence at this point. It doesn't fucking work. But their worldview has to be right, so they have to rewrite things about economics to say, well, it's not trickle-down economics. It's not libertarian philosophy of unregulated market that's causing all this problem, even though we're living in what fresh hell is this right now because of such things. And that leaves people who are disabled and elderly with no resources at all. They do not want to admit their worldview, their world philosophy doesn't work. This aspect doesn't work, and the whole thing doesn't work. And it basically means they're wrong. Right-wing people can also possess the ability to take care of someone. I just want to be clear of that. Right-wing people do this. They may have family members that are become disabled and elderly and take care of them. They do this. And also take 30 minutes a week to spend time with someone they know who is disabled. This suggestion, this spending time thing, is not a left or right thing. An action that only people of a leftist philosophical persuasion can do. It's not that. Like, to suggest that is ridiculous. Like, it's more of an individual person thing. And there's circumstantial things behind that. Like, a lot of people, they already work most of the week. They already spend all their money on the bills they have to pay, and by the end of it all, they may not have the time. They may not have the resources. They may not have the money to help someone else. Why it's important that we pay these taxes, because when you pay the taxes, you have to pay a smaller amount. You're drawing a smaller amount from a bigger pool. Especially if the top 1% starts paying their share. And what is meant by that is that we don't have that tax cutoff where it's like only a certain, after a certain amount of money is made, the rest after that isn't taxed at all. That's our current tax system. So only like the first, 700,000 is taxed. After 700,000, they stop taxing it. A lot of these billionaires and trillionaires pay off their entire yearly taxes within the first minute of the year. That's a for real thing. The suggestion is not a left or right. It is not a left-right thing. An action that only people of a leftist persuasion can do. Right-wing people are certainly capable of doing it as well. They keep killing the program that would guarantee a level of security. These scripted things, it makes me more accurate, I swear. Funding disability is beyond so they keep killing the program that would guarantee the security and well-being, the funding for disability. And why they do that is beyond me and seems selfish and cruel to me personally. But that's just my opinion. Just my opinion. I will say, being that leftist philosophy, being predicated on human rights, humanity, equality, equity too, and is inherently more humanitarian, this makes leftist personality types a lot more likely to actually care about their friends, family, and community, to actually get off the internet and check on someone they know who is disabled and isolated, than that of some right-wing person, which many right-wing philosophies are based on hyper-individualism and things like social Darwinism, making these philosophies inherently antithetical to being humanitarian over one's self-interest or narcissism. Not all. Certainly not all. But that philosophy is there. And many of us see the behavior. And to deny that would just be intellectually dishonest. I mean, there are a lot of people on the right that live their life by that philosophy fully through and through. Which means if a family member or someone they know is elderly or becomes disabled, a lot of the times they don't do anything, and it's basically, sorry for you, best of luck. Doesn't matter how much in need of resources is and how much the descriptive reality is that literally they are stuck. They're disabled. They can't work. They can't. There's nothing they can do to generate a monetary gain to support their life and well-being. What are they supposed to do? Every suggestion is defunded. And as I said earlier, if at least the leftist philosophies of social welfare, social safety nets, of giving them a monthly income, it gives them the ability to sort of bridge that gap of social death and be able to participate in outings, like going to the movies or something, and being able to pay for small things so that they can have that sort of level of social interaction. But a lot of right-wing philosophies, this is what I find strange, is like the left seems to not want to acknowledge the reality that, while you sit there and tell someone who's disabled, hey, go and apply for disability, and not take into account that in their local area or on the federal level at the moment, it's controlled by right-wing political ideologues. And they have either red taped or dismantled that to where it's either so hard to get they won't get it, or just not possible at all. Like some states say you can only claim disability for 5 years even if you're permanently disabled. Who does that help? How is that helpful? They're still disabled after 5 years. What do they do? It just seems like those are the thing with the left is that you're telling them to just go and get disability, but not acknowledging that may not be a possibility. They may need intervention. They may need your help. And I think leftists are more willing to do that. Right-wing people who run with right-wing philosophy tend to be more like, it's okay if everyone chips in money to help me when I retire and when I become disabled. Absolutely expect that. just so long as they don't have to pay for anyone else. That's what it seems like. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it seems like, because every single program, everything that is put out there for elderly and disabled, it seems like the right wing wants to defund it and just say the family's supposed to do it, the church is supposed to do it, these private organizations are supposed to do it, that never do it and don't get the funding they need either, because all you're donating to them is pocket change. And then congratulating some televangelist church for the person having billions and billions and billions of dollars, where they have private jets and everything and have their own arena, but they won't even use their arena to let homeless people come and stay in it. So they're not even doing what they're supposed to. What we're told by the right they're supposed to. So none of it works. And it doesn't seem like right-wing people care. They don't care that their suggestions don't work. They don't care that they don't even fund their own suggestions. They don't even care that while they sit there and say it should be your family, that they, in that same circumstance, would not help their family. Yeah. So, really, this video kind of covers two topics. Social death, which is social isolation, which occurs to people who are disabled. And part of that is monetary, and that they lose social credit because they don't have the monetary means to go out and interact. They lack the physical ability, leaving multiple things that leave them socially isolated, which is what social death is. And the other aspect is having things like disability payments and making sure basic needs are met, like housing, a monthly allowance, to be able to, pay rent, pay the bills, buy food. And I don't think it's unfair to suggest that they should have a little bit of money to buy things that they want from time to time. Nothing extravagant. Not saying they should be able to afford a 5-bedroom house unless they have a giant family, 5 kids or something. I'm not saying that. But, I don't have a problem with people who are on disability that buy a video game for themselves every once in a while. You have to keep in mind, they're socially isolated. You're not paying someone to be lazy. You're paying somebody to live independently who is likely socially isolated because of their physical limitations. And there's very little to occupy and entertain them, so why not allow them to buy a video game every once in a while so that they have something to occupy their mind and something to do? Why not let them have enough money to be able to go out to a restaurant with their friends every once in a while and be able to pay their own way so they don't present as a financial burden on other people? Why not? All of that bridges the gap of social death and social isolation, while also simultaneously presenting the argument that the leftist position on disability, on making sure that basic essentials are met, is not only helpful in stopping social death, not a cure, not a fix, but it also makes society a lot healthier of a place. Which, for some reason, in first world nations, we are failing. And if you look at developing countries, these rural, tribal people, they deal with the disabled and elderly better than we do. And they don't have all this infrastructure. So we can't argue that it can't be done, because people with much less make it happen. I just think some people, are just selfish and narcissistic. Primitive mind. Prove me wrong. So, with that, like, share, subscribe, and comment. And I'll try, if I have room in the description, I came up with multiple ideas for titles to this video. So, if you look at that and there's a title you think that would be better, you can put that in the comments section. I feel like I don't have enough people who watch my shit to reach some kind of consensus. Would probably happen is one person will pick one and another person will pick a different one, and you'll just have two people have two different opinions on what the title should be. But that's not really reaching a consensus on the title. But I'll go ahead and try anyway. I'll screw it. So if you think one of those titles might do better in the algorithm or whatever, just comment that. I'll leave that in the description. Different titles that suggested. And like, share, subscribe, button, all that sort of stuff. Is if that matters when it comes to me. Although I will say, because I don't have to worry about monetization or anything like that, I am very, very liberated and free to discuss or talk about, do many things that some other content creators are not. And also just keep that in mind, leftists. Praxis, like, it may seem like praxis to listen to somebody who talks about how bad it is that this country still doesn't have universal health care and we need that. How we are second and last, well, we're going to be the last, keep going the way that we are on doing socialist things and making sure that basic essential needs are met. We're like second to the last in the world on that. And that needs to change. That may feel good. You may feel like you are changing things by supporting a person with a large platform advocating for socialist policies. But just keep in mind that if you do that and then turn around and know someone who is socially isolated, experiencing social death because they're elderly or disabled, and you do nothing and you ignore that, that's not praxis. That's all I want to say. I'm just pointing. And I'm not saying everyone does it. I don't know everyone. Another thing that crossed my mind is people who might see this video and think that there are people I know in real life that watch my videos. And one of the thoughts that I had was if they watched it and thought that this video was speaking directly to them. I thought that this would be my question to that. Is why do you think the video is directed at you? Do you do those things? And if the answer to that question is no, you don't do those things, then my follow-up is, if you don't do those things, why do you think the video is directed at you? Is that a guilty conscience? Those questions are for you to think about. I'm not a very judgmental person. And I try to be very reasonable. So, yeah. I keep... like, share, subscribe, comment, and all that. I need work from the bell button. And that, the usual